Hello, and welcome back to Election Time News, your one-stop political summations, poll reviews, nonpartisan predictions, interviews, and compilations on other political forecasters. Today is Monday, October 14th, 2024, and today I'll be doing another hypothetical video, how the election would go if there was no polling error, so I'll be taking it straight from the polling averages from 538, and the Electoral College was proportional, meaning that essentially however much of the vote one candidate wins would directly correlate to how many electoral votes they got, which would mean that it would be much better for representing every single vote. If you like content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'll be giving weekly updates on the presidential election predictions every Tuesday. There's another one coming out tomorrow, leading all the way up to a video with my final prediction on the morning of Election Day, as well as updates on the Senate races every Friday. I have a goal of 500 subscribers by Election Day, so do me a favor, help get to that goal, and click on that bright red button below. Also, make sure to join the Discord, get alerts when I upload, take part in an election simulation to test your prediction skills, and more. The link will be in the description. So now on to the video. Here we have a blank electoral map, and I'll actually be going in order of alphabetical, because that's the order in which it is listed on 538, so all I have to do is just press the down arrow. It's going to be much easier than searching for based on poll closing times. To start things off, we have the state of Alabama. So first off, we're going to go for the general presidential election, and looking at the state of Alabama, there might actually not even be a single poll out of Alabama at this point. Yep, not even a poll here, so we're going to just have to go with, unfortunately, a guess here based off of my sheet here. So 26% margin for Donald Trump here would probably be about 6-3. That's 33% margin. That's about the closest that we're going to be able to get to 26. So that would be 6 for Trump and 3 for Harris in the state of Alabama. Next up is going to be the state of Alaska. Now here, there's only 2 polls in the state in the month of September, Trump plus 9 and Trump plus 5. The average of that is going to be Trump plus 7. So looking here, Trump plus 7, that would be closest would be, because Trump is in the lead, he would get the benefit of the lead, meaning that it would originally be 1-1, as that's closest to 50-50, but then Trump wins the state, so he ends up getting the extra electoral vote out of the state of Alaska. Next is going to be the state of Arizona. This is a key swing state. Trump is currently leading with 1.4%. So assuming that is how it ends up going, they would both end up getting 5 electoral votes. And then because Trump would win the state, he would end up getting the benefit of the lead, which means that he would get an extra electoral vote out of the state of Arizona. Next up is going to be the state of Arkansas. Now, these polls by New York Times and CNN, okay, it took a bit to change, but here there's one Trump plus 15 out of Arkansas, which would mean if you move it right here, then we're going to shift it off by 1 in order to get a bit closer. So 33% out of 15, that's actually, out of 15, 33 is actually further away than 0. So peculiarly enough, 50-50 is actually closer for the vote share in Arkansas than 33-66. So they're actually going to perfectly split the electoral votes of the state of Arkansas. Next up is going to be California, 23.7% for Kamala Harris. So if we roughly guess around here, and then we're going to figure out the margin, that's going to be 19. So getting it a bit closer to 23, that's going to be 15. That's 25, so that's a bit too much. Probably moving by 1 each. That's 13. 20, that's 23. So there's 23, and the amazing thing about this is Donald Trump actually gets 21 electoral votes out of the state of California. So those Republican votes in the northern and eastern parts of California are getting counted. So truly, I'm actually a proponent of using this as an official system for future elections. Now, moving on from the state of California, next up is going to be Colorado. We have 2 polls in the month of September or October. They are Harris plus 10 and Harris plus 11, so somewhere around 10.5 points. Now that would just because it's just over 10, that means that it would be closer to 20 than 0. So Harris will get the benefit here, 60 to 40. Next up is going to be the state of Connecticut, where Harris leads by 16. Looking here, unfortunately, as it has a very small amount of electoral votes, that is only going to be 3 to 4, as that is a 15-point margin, which is actually a bit under her actual margin in the state. But there, even Donald Trump gets 3 electoral votes out of the state of Connecticut. Next up is going to be the state of Delaware, where 17 and 20, that is going to be an average of 18.5 in the state of Delaware. That's going to be best at originally splitting 50-50, and then Harris gets the benefit of the victory, like Donald Trump did in Alaska. So Harris is going to take 2 electoral votes out of the state of Delaware. Next is going to be D.C. No polls in D.C., but Harris is going to win by a large amount, going to be pretty close to like 87.5 to 90%. So she is actually going to get all 3 electoral votes out of the Washington, D.C. That is the only area that a candidate will get, all of the electoral votes out of a region is going to be Kamala Harris taking all of the electoral votes in Washington, D.C., because even Wyoming will actually be 2 to 1 because Kamala Harris gets about 25% of the vote there. So this is only 8% error, while this would be 25% error. So we're minimalizing error here, which is why Arkansas ended up being 50-50. So moving on here, now we have the state of Florida. Trump's ahead by 5 points. So looking here, if we split it 50-50 to start, then we have a margin of 5. And if you split it down by 1, then you end up with a margin of 6. So this one's going to be closer. Margin of 6 is going to be a little bit less than a margin of 1. So that is going to be the most accurate that we have there. So Harris is currently leading 74 to 62, but that's mainly from California. That large 12 electoral vote lead there. However, Florida did help offset that. Next up is going to be the state of Georgia. Key swing state, 0.9. That means that the best way to split this is going to be 50-50 in the state of Georgia, as that is only a 0.9% error. Looking in Hawaii, we actually don't have any polls out of Hawaii with Kamala Harris in them at all. So that means that we're going to have to look here, 29% margin. So that's going to be closest right here, but 29 would, this is a 50% margin. And this is, I believe, error of, since it's since it's closer to 50 than 0, it is going to end up being 3 to 1 in Kamala Harris's favor. That's the sad part about these smaller states, is you're going to end up with larger errors naturally. Idaho is next. There's no polls that have Kamala Harris in them. 31%. So that is going to end up being 3 to 1 in Donald Trump's favor, narrowing the gap between the two. Illinois, there are 2 polls, only one from September to October. That's going to be this one, Harris plus 18. So in Illinois, Harris plus 18, we start by splitting it close to 50-50. That is 5. Here, that is going to be 15. That's probably going to be the closest we're going to be able to get. So it is going to be 11 to 8 in the state of Illinois. Next up is going to be Indiana, where we have 3 polls in September. And they're going to be 14, 16, and 17. That average is going to be 15 and 2/3. 15 and 2/3, I do believe. So 15 and 2/3 here. Start by splitting it close to even. Wrong way. So we're splitting it close to even. That's going to be 9. So then this is going to be 17. So that's going to be closer. So then the split here is going to be 7 to 4 Donald Trump. Harris has reached 100 electoral votes. Next up is going to be the state of Iowa. All right, here we have 2 polls from September, 4 and 7. That average is going to be 5.5. So that is going to end up being 50-50 split for the electoral votes out of Iowa, because there's only 6. So that's going to be minimizing the error. Kansas here, there's none that have these two candidates. So looking here in Kansas, we have a margin of 15. So splitting it 50-50, then dropping it down by 1, that is 33. So unfortunately, it's actually going to be closer with 50-50 because 33, splitting that in half, is going to end up being 16.5, and it is not 16.5 points. So we're going to have to split it 50-50 out of Kansas, unfortunately. Now, to make things a bit more fair, actually, they split it 50-50 in Arkansas, and that was definitely to Kamala Harris's benefit. So here I will have her lose a bit and split Kansas 4-2. So it's a bit more fair for Donald Trump so that he can get an extra electoral vote out of it. That's going to be a compromise for Arkansas. Arkansas and Kansas, that's funny. There's basically one inside the other. All right, Kentucky, there's also none with Kamala Harris in there. Kentucky, probably by 26, so that's going to be 50-50. Bump it down by 1, that's going to be 15. 26, that's going to be error of 10, and that's 50, so that's quite a bit more. So, no, 26, so actually, no, this is closer. All right, so 6-2 in Kentucky. Next up is going to be the state of Louisiana. There's none with Kamala Harris in them. So Louisiana, 17 points. 50-50, drop by 1. That's going to be 15 on the nose. So that's pretty close to the margins that are expected out of Louisiana. The race has tightened significantly. Trump is only behind by 4 now, 111-107. There's still 320 up for grabs, though, so this is not close to over yet. Next out of here's going to be Maine. We're going to do just the statewide because otherwise the electoral is not going to be that interesting because Maine and Nebraska aren't going to change at all necessarily. So looking here now out of Maine, we have Harris plus 9 on September 15th. So Harris plus 9, that's going to be closest to 50-50. Next up is going to be the state of Maryland, where we have Harris up by 29. So if we do this, that's going to be 20. Bit closer, that's going to be 40. Since it is 29, it is closer to 40. No, 29 is definitely closer to 20 than 40. So we're going to have it 6-4 for Kamala Harris. Next is going to be the state of Massachusetts, where there are actually 4 polls. 31, 28, 28, 29. That's going to be about 28 3/4. Out of the state of Massachusetts, so probably 7. That's going to be 16. 26. That's about 26 right there. So that's going to be about as close as we're going to be able to get. 7-4 in the state of Massachusetts. So now moving on to Michigan, not Minnesota yet, Michigan first. 0.7, there's 15, but if Kamala Harris does win, then she gets the benefit of the victory, so she gets that extra electoral vote. Now, next up is going to be then the state of Minnesota. Harris is winning by 6 points, but that actually is going to be closer to 50-50 than by 20. So Minnesota is going to split its electoral votes 50-50 between the two candidates. Mississippi, there are no polls with Kamala Harris, which means that moving down here, we can assume it's going to be right around 16 points. So that's probably going to be closest to 33, 16 and a half. I'll give Donald Trump the benefit on this one because of the losses in Iowa. Next up after Mississippi is going to be the state of Missouri. Trump is leading by 12.5 in Missouri. That is going to be closer to 20 points than 0. So Donald Trump will get 6 and Kamala Harris with 4. So now there is a 6 difference between the two. Moving on now to Montana. Trump is ahead by 17 points. So it's going to end up being 0, unfortunately. Is actually closer to 17 than 50 is. So sadly here, we're going to end up actually having to split Montana's electoral votes evenly here between the two candidates. So that's a large error in Montana. So giving the one in Mississippi is a bit more fair now. Nebraska, 18 points here in Nebraska. That is going to end up being Donald Trump having the lead there. It's pretty close to 20 on the nose. So that is not that big of an error. Nevada, Harris ahead by a bit, but it's going to be closer to have 50-50 here in the state of Nevada. Next up is going to be New Hampshire, where Harris has a narrow lead, but 6 points is closer than 50. So we're going to split the electoral votes in the state of New Hampshire. Next state is New Jersey, where there is one single poll with Harris plus 12. So here, that's going to probably be 8-6. Looking here, that's 15. That is not that far off, so we're going to leave it as 8-6 for Kamala Harris. Next up is going to be the state of New Mexico. Looking here, Kamala Harris has an 8-point lead in the polling average, so she gets the benefit of the lead here. Unfortunately, that is going to be a large error in Kamala Harris's favor. Moving on, next is going to be New York, 14.1 points. So if we split it 50-50, that is 0. Here's going to be 7. Yeah, if you move it one more down, that's going to be 15. That is a very small error there, so it's going to be 16-12, meaning that she only has a net positive of 4 instead of 28. Next is going to be North Carolina, where Trump holds a narrow lead. However, it is not enough, so they are going to end up splitting it 50-50. Next state is going to be North Dakota, where Trump has a very comfortable lead of 27. Now, this interesting one here is it's only plus 10, which is still impressive, even for an internal poll. But here is, we're just going to take from this one, Trump plus 27. So Trump plus 27 in the state is going to end up being pretty close to 33. So Trump ends up getting a net positive of 1 in the state of North Dakota. Next is going to be Ohio. Trump is ahead by 7.7, which means that he gets the benefit of the lead, meaning that he gets one more than Kamala Harris in the state of Ohio. Next is going to be Oklahoma. There is one single poll that has Harris in it, so Trump plus 16 in Oklahoma. That is going to be... That's a margin of 15. So here we are going to leave as 1 separation between them. So 7, that's going to be 4 and 1. So now the gap is expanding again. There is a 9 difference between them with 145 electoral votes remaining. There's absolutely enough ground for Donald Trump to make things up, especially in areas like Tennessee, South Carolina, West Virginia, South Dakota, Utah, Wyoming. Those are very good states, especially Texas as well, because he is still going to end up getting up a bit ahead in Texas. It's going to be very close here. Moving on from Oklahoma, next is going to be the state of Oregon, where we have only 2 polls with Harris only ahead by 5. So they're actually going to split 50-50 here in the state of Oregon. Next, moving on here is going to be the state of Pennsylvania, the keystone state of Pennsylvania. Trump, somehow I accidentally selected North Carolina. Here, Harris is ahead by 0.8 of a point in the state of Pennsylvania, which means that Harris ends up getting the benefit of the lead, which means 10 to 9 in the state of Pennsylvania. Next is going to be the state of Rhode Island, where there is actually 4 polls. 14, 13, 13, 20. That's going to bring that up to probably about 15.5 or so. So moving on here, that actually is going to be closer to 50-50 than 50% margin. So moving on now to the state of South Carolina. There's 1 poll here with Harris Trump plus 10. So that is going to end up giving Trump the benefit of the lead, which also ends up being a neat 11-point margin. So Moving on next is going to be South Dakota. There's actually no polls with Kamala Harris in them. So looking down at South Dakota, we can probably expect about 27-point margin. So that's going to be about 66 to 33, splitting it here. And then moving on from South Dakota, we have Tennessee. There is one poll with Kamala Harris in it, Trump up by 26. This was right after she became the candidate, before she gained any traction. That's going to be 9, and that is going to be 16 or so. So moving to 26, we're going to need, that's way too much. So probably a 7 to 4, 20 something. So 26 here. Now Trump is closing in, only 5-point difference between the two. Texas, Trump's ahead by 6.6, so split it even to start, and then give Trump, that's a 10-point margin. So moving it in, that's going to be a 5-point margin between the two right there. So there's a 2-point difference. So now Trump's only behind by 3 electoral votes. This is getting very, very close between the two. So now next after Texas is going to be the state of Utah. Trump up by 15 against Harris. These are all from August. Trump up by 15 in the state of Utah. So moving on now, Utah is going to go 15. That's 33, so actually it's going to be closer to 50-50, but because of some of these benefit of the leads, we're going to give this one to Donald Trump, meaning that now he is behind by a single electoral vote. As we finish up on the last 5 states. Moving on now is going to be Vermont, where Harris is ahead by 40%. So that's going to be 66 to 33 right there, moving in. So she ends up pulling one more ahead. Virginia, 7.6-point lead for Kamala Harris. That's going to mean that she gets the benefit of the lead there. That's going to be 1 point there. So that means that there's 3 left, which means that this is definitely possible. But I think because of Washington here, this may end up securing the election for Kamala Harris, as she's only down by a few. I think actually Wisconsin's going to be the one that's going to save her. In the month of September, she only has 1 poll here in Washington. Harris plus 21. So splitting it even first, and then going down by 1, that's going to be margin of 17. So that's going to be closest. 263 to 258. Harris needs 7 to win the presidency now. Moving in, West Virginia, there is 1 poll here. Trump plus 27, which means that it is going to end up being closer to 50 than 0, just barely over that 25 line, which means that Harris only gets 1 electoral vote out of the state of West Virginia. And now, finally, moving in here on the last 2 states are going to decide the election. Wisconsin. I think that Harris will actually literally pull off a 270 victory here. From what I know about these states, Wisconsin, 0.6. That means that she is going to get 50-50, 269 right here, and then 66 to 33 out of Wyoming. There's no polls here, but out of Wyoming, the margin is usually about 44 points. This is going to be 33. That's going to be closer than 0. So Harris manages to pull out a 270 to 268 victory in this map, trying to get the minimal error in these states and also balance some errors out by moving electoral votes to other states here. This was a very interesting one to work out. If you like content like this, make sure to like this video. Let me know in the comments you want to see more. I will be, of course, getting back to my normal content, updating the presidential map tomorrow. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and don't miss my election night live stream on November 5th, starting at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time and going until 1:30 a.m. on the 6th, or potentially later, depending on how things go. Now, thank you all so much for watching, and have a fabulous rest of your day.